What's up, Midpoint? I am so excited to be teaching you all today on our series, Not Yet, Week 4. The big idea today and what we're going to focus on today is God's plans for you are good. Again, God's plans for you are good. Sometimes it's very hard to believe that because sometimes we think God's plans doesn't make any sense. And it's okay to feel that way. I know that I have come through certain things in my life where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, but God, you're still good. And I do have sometimes a hard time believing it, but I know that is true. And today I just want to encourage you that all the things in your life may not make sense. God's plans for you are always good. There are times in your life where you're looking at some of the plans that God has orchestrated to happen, and you look at them and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why am I going through this certain pain or this certain hurt? Maybe I'm feeling really anxious or sad or just depressed or lonely and confused. And God, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm here to tell you, although it doesn't make sense, God does have a plan to use that pain for His greater purpose, but ultimately it's because God's plans for you are always good. Now here's a quick story. I graduated from college from UNO, University of New Orleans, and I was so excited. I'm like, yay, graduated college. Now, what's the next step? Well, I knew that I thought that the next step in my life was to go to law school. I wanted to be like a big time lawyer because I'm naturally just a really good arguer. I don't even know if arguer is a word, but I can argue really, really well, and I can defend anybody really well. And I just knew that I want to be a big shot lawyer. Well, I graduated college, I applied for law school, I got accepted, and I was ready to go. Well, then God clearly told me, Bianca, you are not meant to go to law school. I heard that in the back of my mind. I'm like, God, is that you or am I tripping? Because it just didn't make any sense. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but it didn't make sense why God told me to sit out a year or just sit out in general. So as I was praying, I'm like, God, do you mean you want me to sit out a year and then go back to law school? Or are we talking about forever? Well, God never gave me the clear answer. He never gave me the clear answer, but He made it very clear that I was not to go into law school immediately. So what did I do? I could have easily chose to be rebellious or not trust God and just say, no, I'm going to go pursue my dream. Or I could have chosen to be obedient and just trust God. Well, I decided to do the right thing and be obedient and trust God. But it didn't come easy. When I told my family, hey, God said that I shouldn't go to law school and I need to sit out, my family did not understand that. And it was very, very hard. I cried and I pleaded and I begged God. I'm like, God, why do I need to sit out? What plans do you have for my life? I didn't understand. And every day my mom would remind me that I'm giving up a dream and, you should follow your dreams and you're losing out on a big opportunity, Bianca, and you're young and you're getting older and yada, yada, yada. It just didn't make sense. But the reality is, that ultimately trusting God and realizing that His plans for my life are always good is what got me here today. And I'm here to tell you, God's going to call you to do something really crazy. What you think is crazy or wild, or He's going to tell you something that just doesn't make sense in your life. But I want you to know that God's plans are always good. Now, if you ever wondered about God's plans for your life, I want you to know you are not alone. I've wondered. I still wonder, even though I did what He told me to do, I still wonder. It's normal. All throughout Scripture, we find people who question God's plans for their life. We find people who are trying to understand their purpose. Sometimes the Bible tells a story of people who put their trust in God and they experience something incredible. But then we also hear stories in the Bible where people struggle to understand God's plans for their life, and it came with many challenges and many hardships. And sometimes, like we see in this passage from the book of Psalms, the Bible gives us a look into the prayers of someone, King David, who is reflecting on God's plan for their lives. Psalm 41 through 5 says this: I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see what he has done and be amazed. They will put their trust into the Lord. Oh, the joys of those who trust the Lord, who have no confidence in the proud or in those who worship idols. Oh, Lord, my God, you have performed many wonders for us. Your plans for us are too numerous to list. You have no equal. If I tried to recite all your wonderful deeds, I would never come to the end of them. We don't know what inspired King David to write this song. We don't know what inspired him. But here's the reality of after reading this. Even when life is difficult or confusing, God can be trusted. If we look back to the past, we can see God has already done many great things in the past for us, and we can look forward to things on the future on our behalf. If we look forward to the future, we can trust God has many great things planned for us. Now, the psalmist, King David, doesn't know exactly what his plans are, what God's plans are for his life, but that's okay. By remembering the ways God has done something good for him and done good stuff for us today and in the past, then we can know we can trust God. Even when David wasn't completely sure what their future looked like, he trusted God. Now let's head over to the New Testament where we have a conversation where you're going to see a conversation between Jesus and Peter. Matthew 16:13 through 23 says this. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." Then he asked him, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, which means rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." Then he sternly warned the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead. But Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. "Heaven forbid, Lord," he said. "This will never happen to you." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Here are two interesting things about this passage. First, Jesus gives Peter the inside scoop about God's plan for Peter's future. He promises Peter that Peter will help build and grow a church. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how Peter reacted or responded, but it's safe to say, you can imagine Peter was most probably excited because Jesus was going to use him to build the church. But then, a short time later in the passage, Jesus gives another look into God's plan for Jesus' life. These plans, though, they don't sound so good. They didn't sound as exciting as the first set of plans. And those plans were that Jesus was going to die. Peter simply couldn't accept that Jesus would die. In Peter's mind, Jesus' death meant two things. It meant that it could mess up his plans for his future, and it just seemed like Jesus was going to go back on his word. How could Jesus use Peter to build his church if Jesus was dead? So you can only imagine what Peter was feeling in this moment. In Peter's mind, the plans that Jesus had for his own life sounded terrible. Can you imagine that you're sent to earth to build up disciples, build up the church, and spread the gospel, but ultimately you were going to die? That just didn't sound great to Peter. Jesus knew that his death was actually good news though. Yes, his death would be painful. It would be hurting and terrible and frightening, but ultimately, then his death would be followed by his resurrection, our salvation, a new relationship with God, and the creation of the church, because Jesus paid the price through his death. Peter may have thought that the news of Jesus was interfering with God's plans for his own life, but in reality, Jesus' death was the essential step in God's plan, not only for Peter's life, but for the whole world too, including us. We can't really blame Peter though, let's be completely honest. It is natural to be fearful when you're told plans, but then it doesn't make sense to you. It is natural for us to be afraid, but I imagine Peter may have reacted differently if he remembered the words we read a few minutes ago from the Psalms. If he had, he may have recognized, even when life is difficult or nothing makes sense or it's just confusing, Jesus can still be trusted. In the past, Jesus has already done so many good things on Peter's behalf. And in the future, he could trust Jesus had good things planned as well. And what is true for David and what is true for Peter is true for us too. The same God then is the same God today, and he can be trusted with our future, and he can be trusted to do many, many great things. Now, even when God's plans doesn't make sense to you, they are all full of hope and promises for you. I'll be honest, God's plan for my life to give up with what was one of my dreams then made no sense. But I know this today, and I know that it's true. Because I trusted and was obedient, there are many blessings, and I can truly say that I'm truly happy walking in the calling that I have over my life today. Is it a bit scary? Absolutely. Does the selfish side of me want to go back to law school sometimes? Absolutely. But I know that God's plans for my life ultimately is to be here today, and I'm grateful for that. And I want you to know that sometimes God is going to call you to do things or say things or trust in him that make no sense. But just do it, because those plans, the plans that he has for your life, are ultimately way better than the plans that you have for your own life. You're probably not going to be able to open the Bible or read a passage that's going to simply tell you which school to attend or which job to attend, but God will speak to you. But here's what scripture does tell us about God's plans for our life. Even when you don't know his specifics, you can always trust God. Even when you don't understand, or you may not even know the details, you can always trust God. Why? Because God's plans for you are always good.